My name is Hailey Carter. I'm 31 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the woman who tried to humiliate me. In front of my entire family, I'm sitting alone in my car right now, in the dark, parked a few houses down from my in-laws' estate. My hands are still shaking, my stomach's in knots, and honestly, I don't even know why I thought tonight would be any different. For 6 years, I've tried everything to earn my mother-in-law Evelyn's approval. I married her son, Jason, the golden boy of the family, with his Ivy League degree and perfect jawline, and ever since the day we said I do, Evelyn's made it painfully clear I'm not good enough for him. Not polished enough, not wealthy enough, not born into the right kind of family. It started with little things. Backhanded compliments about my dress at holidays. Jokes about my modest upbringing in front of her wine club friends. She always found a way to remind me that no matter how many birthdays or anniversaries I showed up for, I would always be the outsider. Jason would tell me to ignore it. That's just how Mom is, he'd say. And for a while, I did. I told myself it wasn't worth the drama, that keeping the peace was more important than calling her out. But tonight was different. Evelyn invited the entire extended family over for one of her elaborate dinner parties, the kind where the place settings probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. I went, like always, trying to smile through the fake pleasantries. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. She'd even complimented my earrings when I walked in, and for a split second, I believed we were finally in a good place. Halfway through dinner, someone needed a refill on water. No one else moved, so I grabbed the pitcher. As I poured a glass for Jason's uncle, Evelyn let out this sharp little laugh and, loud enough for the whole table to hear, said, "Well, isn't she just the perfect little maid?" There was this awkward, stunned silence, then a few forced chuckles from people too spineless to do anything else. I felt the blood rush to my face. Jason looked down at his plate. No one defended me. Not one person. And in that instant, something in me snapped. I knew right then I wasn't going to let this one slide. Not this time. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but it was over for Evelyn. She had no idea. But by the end of that night, my husband would shock every single person in that room, and my mother-in-law would lose the things she cared about most. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. My mom taught me early how to be polite, how to pick my battles, and how sometimes it's easier to just keep the peace than to stir things up. I learned to swallow my pride, to smile through things that hurt, and to convince myself that as long as the people you love are happy, that's what matters. I carried that with me when I moved to Chicago after college, chasing a career in graphic design and a fresh start. I wasn't looking for love, but then I met Jason when I was 25, and we met through mutual friends at a rooftop bar in the city. Jason was everything I wasn't used to. Tall, clean-cut, Ivy League educated, with the kind of effortless charm that made people lean in when he spoke. But what hooked me wasn't the money or the pedigree. It was that he saw me, really saw me. In a room full of loud, shiny people, he asked about my job, my family, my dreams. He listened. He remembered things I told him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself down to be liked. We got married 2 years later in a small, beautiful ceremony by the lake. My side of the aisle was modest. A few old friends, my mom, and my cousins. His side looked like a casting call for a country club ad. From the moment Evelyn laid eyes on me, she made it crystal clear I was not what she'd envisioned for her only son. She masked it with polite smiles, but the digs were constant. At our engagement party, she introduced me to one of Jason's business associates as his friend Hailey. At Christmas, she handed out personalized gift baskets to everyone. Mine was filled with cleaning supplies. She'd make comments about how cute it was that I still worked full-time, like it was some temporary hobby I'd outgrow. And Jason would always try to smooth it over. "That's just how Mom is," he'd say. Or "she doesn't mean anything by it." I wanted so badly to be part of his world, to be accepted by the family he loved. So I bit my tongue. For years, I let myself believe that if I just smiled enough, if I made the right dishes for Thanksgiving, if I wore the dress she complimented, eventually she'd come around. I made myself small so she wouldn't feel threatened. But lately, things had started to shift. I'd been promoted at work to senior designer, managing my own team, getting real recognition for the first time. For once, I wasn't just Jason's wife. I was Hailey Carter, someone worth noticing. And maybe that's why, when Evelyn invited me to this big family dinner, a part of me believed it meant something. That maybe she'd seen the change in me. Maybe she was ready to finally let me in. I didn't realize until tonight how low I'd let my standards fall. How much of myself I'd given away, just for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. All I'd ever wanted was to belong somewhere, to be respected. And I kept hoping if I was patient, if I stayed kind, if I didn't make waves, it would happen. That people would eventually treat me the way I deserved. But what I learned tonight is that the longer you let people treat you like you're nothing, the harder it is to remember you were ever worth more. Chat said, "The house was exactly what you'd picture when someone says the word estate. Long, winding driveway, manicured hedges. The kind of grand entryway with a chandelier so big it could crush you if it ever came loose." Evelyn loved putting on these elaborate dinners, complete with place cards and crystal glassware, and tonight was no exception. The table stretched so far it barely fit in the dining room, packed with relatives I barely knew. Uncles, cousins, people Jason hadn't mentioned in years but who somehow always showed up for Evelyn's performances from the moment we walked in. The air was thick with that polite, sugary tension. Evelyn greeted me with a tight smile and a glance at my dress, like she was assessing whether it was expensive enough to tolerate. She made little comments all evening, the kind that sounded harmless to anyone else but landed like tiny knives. "Oh, you'll never understand this wine, dear. It's from a small French vineyard, not the kind you'd find at a supermarket." Or when I reached for a serving spoon, she swooped in with, "Let me help you with that. It's complicated." Always with that tone, condescending, performative, a reminder that in her eyes, I didn't belong here. And like a fool, I told myself to smile, keep it light. For Jason, I glanced at him, hoping for one of those reassuring looks. But he was too busy chatting with his uncle about market trends, or whatever nonsense rich people bond over. Halfway through the meal, as conversation lulled, and wine glasses emptied, Evelyn turned to me, her voice dripping with that false sweetness. "Hailey, dear, would you mind getting some more water from the kitchen?" The way she said it wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as a favor. And like an idiot, eager to be helpful, eager to keep the peace, I nodded. "Of course," I said, standing up. I made my way to the kitchen, filled the pitcher with ice water, and started making my way around the table. I'd just finished refilling Jason's uncle's glass when it happened. Evelyn let out a sharp, almost gleeful little laugh and said, clear as day so the entire table could hear, "She's practically the maid around here." There was a beat of stunned silence, then a few awkward chuckles. Some of Jason's cousins exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. And Jason stared down at his plate like he hadn't heard a thing. I felt the heat rush to my face, my ears burning. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It wasn't just the words. It was everything behind them. Every little comment she'd made over the years. Every time she left me out of a family photo. Every holiday gift that felt like a jab. It all came crashing down on me in that moment. And the humiliation was so complete. I could barely breathe. I set the pitcher down, muttered something about needing to use the bathroom, and made my way down the hall. The sound of muffled conversation fading behind me. I locked the door, stared at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. My eyes were glassy, my lips trembling, and all I could think was, how did I let it get this far? And then, like a lightning strike, it hit me. I wasn't even mad at Evelyn. Not really. I was mad at myself. For every dinner I'd smiled through. For every insult I'd pretended not to hear. For every moment I let her decide my worth. I'd spent years hoping that if I just stayed quiet, stayed polite, she'd come around. But people like Evelyn don't come around. They take, and they belittle, and they enjoy watching you shrink. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and stared hard at my reflection. I wasn't leaving that house humiliated. I wasn't walking out of there like their maid. No. This time, Evelyn was going to pay. And by the time this night was over, she wouldn't see it coming. I splashed some cold water on my face, took one last deep breath, and forced myself to walk back into that dining room like nothing had happened. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. The conversations had resumed. Wine glasses clinked, and dessert plates were being passed around as if my public humiliation had been nothing more than a passing joke. I slid back into my seat, plastering on a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half, and tried to act normal. But inside, something in me had shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was colder than that, sharper. For the first time, I wasn't focused on surviving Evelyn's cruelty. I was thinking about how to end it. I scanned the table, noticing things I hadn't before. Jason wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared into his glass, swirling the dark red liquid like it held the answers to some question he wasn't brave enough to ask. His uncle made a forced comment about golf scores, pretending nothing had happened. A few of the cousins tittered at the other end of the table, trying to pretend it was all fine. But one person caught my attention, Rachel, Jason's younger cousin. She was staring at me with this guilty, stricken look, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Her face flushed when our eyes met, and she quickly looked away. It was all so clear. They all knew Evelyn was cruel. They'd seen it for years, but no one had the spine to stand up to her. I could feel the war inside me. One part of me wanted to stand up, slam my napkin on the table, and tell every last one of them exactly what I thought. I imagined it so clearly. The satisfying gasp, Evelyn's stunned face, Jason's weak protest. I pictured myself grabbing my purse, walking out the front door, never looking back. But another part of me, the part that had been quietly, carefully watching this family for years, knew that wouldn't touch her. People like Evelyn didn't care about feelings or confrontations. She cared about power, about reputation, about maintaining her carefully curated image of perfection. And that's when I remembered. The phone call. It was months ago, on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I'd stopped by the house to drop off a casserole for Jason's dad, who was recovering from surgery. Evelyn hadn't realized I was there yet. I was in the hallway, leaving a voice note for myself about a client project. When her voice floated out from the sitting room, I hadn't meant to listen, but something about her tone made me pause. I heard her laugh, then say clear as day, "Well, it's not like anyone's ever going to audit a cancer charity. That's my condo now, and no one's taking it from me." I remember freezing, my stomach dropping. I hadn't fully processed what I was hearing. Evelyn bragging about embezzling money from the family's charity foundation, the one they used for holiday press releases and country club fundraisers, the one Jason worked charity events for without thinking. I hit record on my phone. I caught a full minute of her talking about how easy it had been, how clueless everyone was, how Jason didn't even know about the property deed in her name. At the time, I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me was terrified, afraid no one would believe me, afraid it would blow up my marriage, afraid I'd somehow be the one blamed. So I saved it in a forgotten folder on my phone and tried to convince myself it wasn't my problem. But sitting at that table now, watching her smirk like a cat who'd just eaten a canary, I knew exactly what needed to happen. The fear was still there. God, it was there. I knew what exposing her could cost me. Jason might turn on me. He might refuse to believe it, might see it as some desperate, petty revenge plot. His father might cover it up. The family might close ranks. I could burn every bridge in one night. And yet, for the first time, the weight of silence felt heavier than the risk of speaking. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing up for the woman I'd been 6 years ago, desperate for approval, for the girl in the bathroom an hour earlier, humiliated and small, for every person Evelyn had stepped on to climb higher. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I reached for my phone under the table, scrolling to the old voice memo. The screen lit up, the title still there. Accidental recording, March 14th. My thumb hovered over it. This wasn't just a moment. It was a line in the sand, and I knew once I crossed it, there was no going back. But the truth was, I didn't want to. I was done playing nice, done swallowing my pride. Evelyn had built her entire life on control, on making people too scared or too polite to challenge her. And tonight, in front of her perfect, fragile little world, I was going to take that away. Dessert had just been served when I made my move. The table was glowing in soft candlelight, conversation low and pleasant again, as if the entire night hadn't been one long, thinly veiled assault. Evelyn was in her element, sipping from a glass of some overpriced Chardonnay, her painted lips curled into a satisfied little smile. Jason still hadn't looked at me. The cowardice in that made my stomach twist, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. I cleared my throat gently and tapped my spoon against my glass. The soft clink echoed through the room, pulling every head in my direction. Jason looked up, startled. Evelyn arched a brow, the corners of her mouth twitching like she was already anticipating the meek, awkward apology she thought I was about to deliver. The room quieted, all eyes on me. If I could have just a moment, I began, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I just wanted to thank you all for this evening, for the hospitality. It's not always easy walking into a room like this when you know you don't quite fit. There were a few nervous chuckles. Evelyn smirked. I could feel the whole table leaning in, expecting me to crack a joke, make it light, maybe even apologize for being too sensitive earlier. I smiled, but not the kind they were used to seeing. I've learned a lot from this family over the years, I continued, lifting my glass. Lessons about grace, about silence, about how sometimes it's easier to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, to pretend you didn't hear what you heard or see what you saw. But tonight, I realized there's one thing I've been missing, the lesson about standing up for yourself. I set my glass down. My hand reached into my lap where my phone was already queued up. The recording paused at the perfect moment. My heart was hammering in my chest. I looked directly at Evelyn, watched the confidence flicker in her eyes like a candle caught in a sudden draft. I wanted to share something, I said softly. A memory, actually, from a little while back. It stuck with me. And with that, I pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the room, crisp and unmistakable, dripping with arrogance. Well, it's not like anyone's ever going to audit a cancer charity. That's my condo now, and no one's taking it from me. The room froze. The words seemed to hang in the air like toxic smoke. Forks clattered onto plates. One of the aunts gasped audibly. Jason went pale, his face slack with shock. His father stiffened, his jaw tight, the blood draining from his cheeks. I let the recording play out for another few seconds, Evelyn laughing, bragging about how easy it was, how clueless everyone was. Then I hit stop and placed my phone gently in the center of the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's face was a mask. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting from face to face, calculating, desperate to gauge how much damage had just been done. I met her gaze, my voice steady and low. I may be your maid, Evelyn, I said, my words slicing through the quiet like a blade. But you're about to be a convicted felon. Jason shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Is this real? He demanded, his voice sharp and breaking at the same time. Tell me this isn't real. Evelyn opened her mouth, reaching for some weak, half-formed denial. But Jason wasn't having it. Enough, he snapped. Get out. She stared at him, stunned, as though it had never once occurred to her that her perfect son might actually turn on her. Jason, she's lying. This is some kind of setup. Some pathetic little. You're done. Jason's father cut in, his voice like stone. You crossed a line, Evelyn. I knew you were cruel. But this? He shook his head. Disgust etched into every line of his face. A few of the cousins were still frozen in shock. Rachel had tears in her eyes, and for the first time all night, I felt someone in that room on my side. Jason's hands were shaking as he picked up my phone and replayed the recording, his face crumbling with every word. When it ended, he set it down like it burned him. I'll be filing charges, he said coldly. And you're out of the foundation. Out of my life. Evelyn's face collapsed. She reached out, but no one moved to help her. No one defended her. No one made a sound. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one holding the detonator. The fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, Evelyn was removed from the foundation's board. Jason's father, humiliated and furious, called an emergency meeting with the foundation's legal team. A full investigation was opened, and once the initial evidence from that recording was verified, the rest of her secrets started unraveling like a loose thread. Hidden bank accounts, a second property under a false name, charity funds funneled into personal expenses for years. Everything she'd spent decades building. Her spotless reputation, her social standing, her iron grip on the family. It all crumbled in less than a week. Jason was a wreck. I think for the first time in his life, he saw his mother clearly, not through the rose-colored haze of loyalty or childhood affection, but for what she was. He came to me a few nights later, standing in the doorway of our bedroom like a man who didn't know where he belonged. His voice cracked when he said, I should have defended you. I should have seen it sooner. I let you down. I didn't say anything for a long time, because part of me wanted to scream at him, and part of me just felt tired. But eventually, I told him the truth. It was never about revenge, Jason. Not really. It was about taking back the part of me I gave away trying to please people who were never going to accept me. I stayed quiet for too long. We both knew it wouldn't be fixed overnight. Trust isn't something you can patch up with a few apologies. Our marriage cracked under the weight of everything that had gone unsaid for years. We fought. We cried. There were nights he slept in the guest room. But to his credit, Jason showed up. He started therapy. He stopped making excuses for people like Evelyn. He started listening, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I felt something shift inside myself too. A weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years was gone. I stopped letting people's disapproval shrink me. I stopped walking into rooms hoping to be liked. I started speaking up when things felt wrong, no matter how uncomfortable. It made other people, the family, splintered, as I knew it would. Some of them clung to Evelyn's side, convinced I'd orchestrated some personal vendetta. Others, especially the younger cousins like Rachel, quietly reached out, thanking me for finally saying what no one else had dared. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't care which side people picked. I realized the cruelest people thrive in silence, and the moment you take your voice back, you take their power too. Chat said. 1 year later, I found myself walking past Evelyn's old luxury condo, the one with the glass balcony she used to stand on like a queen surveying her little kingdom. It was empty now, sold off to some developer who didn't know or care about the people who'd once paraded through those marble halls. I stopped for a second, just long enough to take in how ordinary it looked without all the people pretending to be something they weren't. The truth is, I don't think about them much anymore. After everything, after the lies and the betrayals and the moment I finally stood up for myself, life moved on. I moved on. I started this small side business, just an idea at first, designing brand identities for women-owned nonprofits. It wasn't about making millions or proving anything to anyone. It was about building something that felt like mine, something honest. I work with women who've fought their own battles, who've been overlooked, underestimated, talked down to, and I help them tell their stories. I see them in ways no one ever saw me back then. And every time a new logo goes live or a campaign hits its goal, I feel this quiet pride settle in my chest. Not the kind you chase, but the kind you earn. For a long time, I really believed I needed their acceptance. I thought if I just played the part, the perfect wife, the obedient daughter-in-law, the quiet, grateful girl from nowhere, maybe they'd finally let me belong. But what I needed wasn't their approval. It was my own. I had to look in the mirror and decide that I was enough, that I didn't have to shrink myself to fit in spaces built to make me small. And now I don't beg for seats at tables I was never meant to sit at. I build my own. And for the record, I'll never be anyone's maid again.